What is the one thing that will haunt you for the rest of your life? Story 1. I was part of the recovery crew that retrieved all of the SEALs and aircrew from the helicopter crash in Afghanistan on August 5th of last year. My platoon and I were the first ones on the scene, before first light, after basically sprinting the 5K there in full kit. I'll never forget seeing the bodies of those men I lived and worked with burning, then smoldering in that twisted pile of wreckage. We didn't have fire extinguishers, so we couldn't put them out. We had to wait until they stopped burning on their own. I still can't eat steak because of the smell. By the time our reinforcements arrived with trucks to drive their remains away, we had already had body bags dropped in, collected them, and put them inside. I still have nightmares about it every so often, and I'm pretty sure I always will. The part that bothers me the most is that the media reported they died instantly. They didn't. They were hugging each other and holding hands when we found them. It was heartbreaking. Rest easy, brothers. You've earned it. Edit. Holy shit. This is the largest outpouring of support I could have imagined. I'll just clarify a few things, and then I'm done with this account forever. First off, they were part of what the media calls SEAL Team 6, the same unit that took down bin Laden. I can't discuss the size or organization of their unit, but I can assure you they weren't the ones who were part of that raid. So no, there was no giant media cover-up about that. Secondly, I am an Army Ranger, not pararescue. We were operating in the area that night and got the call to go out and secure the site. We were there for about 36 hours until we were replaced by another set of Rangers. The only other people there were some regular Army grunts who came in with trucks to take away the fallen. Finally, I wholeheartedly agree about the knee-jerk reaction of saying, "Thank you for your service." While I deeply appreciate the gratitude, this is my job and I volunteered for it. It's nice to know we're supported, but it's even nicer when people show their gratitude through their actions. Call your congressman, write your senators, and maybe someday there won't be a reason to thank soldiers for their service. God knows that day can't come soon enough when we won't send more amazing young men to die for old men's wars. Story 2. Without a doubt, the night my son died. I am trained in CPR and had to perform mouth-to-mouth on him. It was the single worst experience of my life. He had stopped breathing because he had the flu, and we later found out that he had other issues going on that night that no amount of CPR could have fixed. He also had a seizure disorder that they couldn't get under control. Long story short, the CPR was the hardest thing I have ever done or will ever do. In every medical class they always teach, first, do no harm. I literally felt my son's ribs break under my fingertips. I can still taste the acrid flavor of his seizure medicine that came back up. My family wonders why I spent the better part of 2 years on heavy PTSD meds. I never told them about the experience of giving him CPR. The night was horrifying enough. I still haven't told them, and I still wake up in a cold sweat. The paramedics assured me that I did everything I could, but I still feel like maybe I did it wrong, or that I hurt him too much for him to have any chance of recovery. For those who may ask, he officially died from lack of oxygen to the brain, from long-term, uncontrolled seizure activity, and pulmonary edema, fluid in the lungs. He would have been 8 years old tomorrow, April 13th, 2004. He is deeply missed, and the world was a much better place with him in it. Story 3. From the time I was 2 years old, I loved my neighbor. I mean, really loved her. She was probably around 50 back then. She always had a hammock in her yard, and I would go sit on it with her. She was a bigger lady, and, for some reason, I loved to poke her belly. Don't ask me why, but we got along great. She would read to me on that hammock, and we would just hang out for hours. She loved the smell of lilac flowers, and I would always pick some from my yard and bring them to her. She also loved black licorice, so I would bring her good and plenty candy. She could perfectly mimic a bird call, a cardinal, I think, and whenever she was outside and saw me, she would make the call. That was my cue to come over, hang out on the hammock, and have her read to me. We were best friends. One day I even wrote her a breakup letter because she made me mad over something silly, and she thought it was the cutest thing. When I was around 8 years old, I was eating dinner when I heard sirens. I looked across the yard and saw her being carried out on a stretcher. She'd had a stroke and was taken to the hospital. I was traumatized. I don't know what came over me, but after that day, I never went back. I couldn't face her anymore. When she recovered after a few weeks, she did the cardinal call, and I ignored it. I wish I had gone back, because a couple of years later she had a second stroke and died. I would give anything to have visited her again. After she passed, I went to her house to see her husband and found the letter I had written her. She had kept it all those years because she thought it was special, and she had planned to show it to me at my graduation. I really wish I could go back and tell her I'm sorry, and that she was truly special to me. I would give anything. Story 4. When I was a teenager, I was a hellish little bastard. I was awful to my parents. I rarely spoke to them, smoked weed all the time, drank, skipped school. When they would drive 2 hours after a long day of work, and my mom worked nights, so it was even harder to see my wrestling meets and football games, I wouldn't talk to them or go up to see them. I regret everything I did to them from ages 15 to 19. My dad bought me lawyers and paid my bail when I screwed up, and still I treated him like shit. Not that it's an excuse, but I was hormonal and incredibly frustrated. Later, after our relationship got much better, I call my parents constantly for advice and just to see how they're doing now that I'm 26. I found out that both of them had been pretty awful teens to their own parents, and they felt they kind of deserved the way I acted, though they absolutely didn't. But the absolute worst thing I ever did was this, and I will remember it like it was yesterday for the rest of my life. I came home one night acting like a total piece of shit. My mom was home, and she said, "How was your day?" I grumbled at her. She continued, "I just want to know about your life. How are you doing? Are you dating? How is school?" And I said, "Go to hell, you cunt." She looked at me in shock, and then the tears came. She cried in her room until my dad got home. Normally, he would have smacked me for treating his wife like that, and I would have deserved it. But he just shook his head. I went to my room and cried my eyes out. Too proud to apologize or explain how hard I had it at school, or how I was working out 3 to 4 hours a day to cut weight for wrestling. It was fucking awful, man. I can still see her face when I said it. I owe them the world. I'll take care of them when they're too old to take care of themselves. And as soon as I'm making decent money, I'm buying them a vacation to Europe so they can see the world. They never took vacations. They gave everything up for their kids. Story 5. When I was 14, my mother was diagnosed with stage 3 melanoma after complaining for several months about painful bumps on her back. I was always very close to her. We could practically read each other's minds. She had this amazing way of helping me piece together memories that bothered me, like the names of long-lost friends or the locations of certain events. When she went into the city to see the oncologist, I remember getting calls each morning from my father telling me how much he loved me and how proud he was of me as he drove to the hospital to be with her. His voice was always quivering, and I could imagine him saying those things to me and my brother with tear-streaked cheeks. We went into the city to visit her, and it was so nice to see her after such a long absence. At one point, my dad announced that he was going to get an egg cream with my brother's favorite drink. They left the room, and my mom asked me to sit on the bed with her. She told me the treatment wasn't working and that she had decided to go the natural route and let her body fight the cancer. She asked if I understood what she meant. I tried to smile and nod, but my mouth wouldn't cooperate. Instead, I squeaked out a weak, "Yeah." She told me it was okay to cry. I asked if I could go get a drink, and when she nodded, I bolted from the room. I didn't know what to do, so I called my best friend's mom. I thought I could explain, but I barely got through the greeting before I broke down sobbing on the phone. It was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. A man in the waiting room just stared at me with a look of pity mixed with disdain. About 3 months after her diagnosis, she underwent lymph removal surgery on her left side. After that, she was always very tired and spent most of her time in a hospital bed we'd rented for the house. One day, my brother and I were goofing around on the bed beside hers. She couldn't turn her head, but she knew we were there. My brother hurt himself and started crying, and my mom scolded me for hurting him. One of my biggest pet peeves is being blamed for something I didn't do, and I snapped back. "Don't yell at me for something I didn't do. You can't even see what happened." She broke down crying. I had said it just to hurt her, and I regretted it instantly. Over the next few months, she tried to remain active. Sometimes we would walk around the block together. One sunny day in June, we went outside and saw that the tree in front of the house had blossomed. She asked me to take her picture in front of it, and coincidentally, she was wearing a shirt the same color as the flowers. But when we tried to walk, she couldn't even make it past the driveway. I kept trying to stay positive, hiding how terrified I was. A few nights later, when I went to kiss her goodnight, she asked me with tears in her eyes, "Are you afraid of me?" I told her no, and asked why she thought that. She said she just felt left out. I comforted her, and as I stepped back to leave, she asked, "Do you think I'm going to be all right?" I looked her in the eyes and said, "Yes, Mom, I really do." "How do you know?" she whispered. I grabbed her hand and told her, "Because life always finds a way." The next day, my cousins and I were playing Rock Band, something my relatives had chipped in to buy to keep us distracted. Suddenly, there was a commotion. People rushed around. The ambulance came, and my mom was carried out on a stretcher. She had suffered a seizure. My aunts wouldn't let me see what was happening. They kept us in the room with the game. She was moved to hospice, and we visited her every day. But with each day, she was more heavily medicated. On her birthday, I brought her a card, the first one I had ever written her. I tried to read it to her, but I choked up after "Dear Mom." My aunt gently took the card from me and read it aloud while I covered my mouth, trying not to let my mom see me sobbing. The card promised I would always be there for her, that we would always be a team no matter what. I wanted so badly for her to respond, to say it was lovely, but she couldn't. She was too medicated, barely lucid. After several minutes, with some coaxing from my aunt, she managed to smile and nod. I leaned in, kissed her, and wished her a happy birthday. That was one of the last times I saw her. She passed away a week later in her sleep. It was only after her death that I realized how little I had known about her. I never knew she was fluent in Mandarin or that she had given up a job offer to be an ambassador so she could stay home and raise me. We also had a golden retriever at the time who was always by her side at home. When she was taken out on the stretcher, our dog waited by the door for her return. Every time we came home without her, she would sniff for her and whimper. After my mom passed away, Goldie, whom I had proudly named myself at 6 years old, found one of her shirts and slept next to it every night. Story 6. The day my mother died. I was 16. She was a single mom, raising me by herself. We had been going through a rough patch since I was around 13 or 14, and I had hit the know-it-all, rude, ungrateful teenage years. I was such an ass to her, and I regret it deeply. She had just started dating this guy, and we all went to the beach at a lake one summer day in July. She loved the water, even though she couldn't swim. She would never go too deep, but that day, I was about 15 feet away from her when I saw her head go under. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then I saw her arms slowly waving, and then flailing frantically. That's when I realized she was in trouble. I was in water up to my stomach, but I also couldn't swim, so I turned and ran for the lifeguard. I screamed that my mom had gone under, and he radioed others before running into the water. The lake was murky, and it took 5 agonizing minutes to find her. Each time a swimmer came up saying they couldn't, my heart sank further. Finally, they pulled her out. CPR started immediately, but she was unresponsive. Soon, the ambulance arrived. During all of this, an older Hispanic woman held me tightly while I screamed and panicked. I rode in the ambulance with her to the hospital. They said they were struggling to stabilize her heart and that she was resisting when they tried to put in a chest tube. They warned she might have brain damage from being deprived of oxygen, but they wouldn't know until she woke up. That night, a nurse told me at least her heart was beating and all we could do was wait. I went to sleep terrified but clinging to hope. She wouldn't leave me all alone, right? At 7:20 the next morning, a doctor woke me up. He told me her heart had stopped around 6:30 and they couldn't revive her. That moment is burned into me forever. He was in green scrubs, a white coat, rubber boots, and looked remarkably like David Morse, the actor. He delivered the news matter-of-factly, then left. I didn't cry at first. I was in shock. I calmly sat by her bedside, but then it hit me, and I broke down. I begged her, "What am I going to do without you? I can't make it on my own. I'm scared. I need you. Please come back, Mama." I sobbed and screamed at her body until her boyfriend came in and told me to stop making a scene. He pulled me away and told me to compose myself. I did, but to this day I wish I had ignored him and thrown myself onto her to give her one last hug. The next days, weeks, and months were a blur. I became severely depressed and withdrawn. And even though it has now been 12 years, I still miss her every single day. It never gets easier. Everything I do to honor her memory. I regret being such a shitty teenager and taking her for granted. TLDR, my mom drowned while I watched helplessly because I couldn't swim. Backstory, I had no other family. Her death left me completely alone. She was an orphan herself and had fought for everything in her life to give me a decent one without my dad. It's ironic that her biggest fear came true. She always worried something would happen to her, and I'd end up alone. Hopefully, she wasn't conscious enough to realize it. Since then, I've worked to pay off our mortgage, which I did, and put myself through college. I'm just trying to live the way I think she would have wanted me to. Story 7. When I was 14, I went to my friend's house. He was 15. It had just been my birthday, and he said he had a gift for me. We were pretty close, and I had skipped school to go over there. At the time, I was skipping school a lot. When I arrived, he opened the door, and I saw he had a gun. I don't remember everything clearly, but somehow I understood that he had decided to kill himself, and that he was going to take me with him. I remember trying to talk him out of it. I've always been able to talk people into or out of almost anything, but this time he wouldn't change his mind. I don't remember crying, but I think I did. It was painfully clear he was set on it. He pointed the gun at me. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I could feel myself shaking. I remember every smell, every sound, but not one single image. I heard him take a deep breath. Then he pulled the trigger. Bang! When I heard the gunshot, I thought I was dead. Time stopped. My feelings stopped. Looking back, I can almost pinpoint the moment the PTSD began, not the panic attacks or flashbacks later on, but the feeling of nothingness. Then I opened my eyes. Instantly, I realized I was covered in blood. It was on my face, my hair, my hands, everywhere. I still get flashbacks of that awful crimson color, as if it were yesterday. And then, in the middle of his living room, right next to the family picture, was a piece of his brain. I made a list in my head. Gray matter really is gray. I stared at the details so I wouldn't have to look at him directly. A morbid inventory. Pieces of brain, pieces of skull, and so much blood. A pool of blood. And then him, with no head and no face. But the thing that will haunt me for the rest of my life, because it still haunts me day and night, even with strong medication, is that sound. The wail his mother made when she found him, his brains all over her house, and me in shock standing next to him. Her screaming and crying as she dropped to the floor to hug her little boy. Her screams are still so vivid, the incoherent sounds she made. I vaguely remember her words, something like, "My beautiful boy," and her sobbing as she caressed what was left of his face, repeating over and over, "My beautiful boy, my beautiful baby boy, my boy," as she soaked her clothes with his blood and brains and her own tears, until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. And I realized how dead he had left us inside, as his mother wailed until she had no voice left. Story 8. Having come from a broken home and surviving both molestation and later rape as I neared adulthood, I would still have to say the most painful experience of my life was losing my first boyfriend to suicide. I had my first boyfriend in 8th grade. Of course, dating at that age was silly, mostly just kissing, holding hands, and boosting your social status a little, at least in my school. We broke up during summer break, but got back together in the middle of our freshman year when we started hanging out through a mutual friend. This time we actually got to know each other. We discovered we had a lot in common and loved talking. He was the sweetest first love a girl could have. For my birthday, he brought me a dozen roses, a stuffed animal, and a Milky Way to school, and gave it to me in front of everyone before classes started. He wrote me poetry all the time. It was adorable. Everything was great until sophomore year. I wouldn't have sex with him, beyond a blowjob, because I thought we were too young. He ended up cheating on me with my best friend. I was heartbroken. Luckily, by then I was in home studies and was able to spend a week at home crying. It destroyed me, like it would any teenage girl. I eventually got over him, dated other boys and girls, and graduated high school at 17. I started going to the community college in town and ran into him one day. We chatted a few times, and he invited me out a couple of times, but I was usually busy. Finally, a few weeks before my 18th birthday, I agreed. He picked me up, we drove around, and parked in a lot near some model homes being developed. We sat in his car for about 2 hours talking and listening to Postal Service and The Cure. We talked about how I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and he was trying to figure out the same. He told me he'd been kicked out of his dad's house and had been couch surfing. He didn't want to work or go to school. He didn't know what he wanted to do. Eventually, we ran out of things to say and started making out. He pulled blankets and pillows out of his trunk and made a makeshift bed on the ground in the parking lot. We had just started having sex when an older woman pulled in, flashed her brights, and started screaming at us in Spanish. We freaked out, grabbed our stuff, and jumped back into his car half-dressed before driving off. He took me home, and that was that. After that night, I didn't hear from him for about a week, so I called to see if he wanted to hang out again. When he answered, he was so happy. He immediately started talking about how much I'd helped him by talking that night, how I'd made him realize what he wanted to do. He'd found a job, decided to go back to school, resolved things with his father, and moved back home, and even proposed to his girlfriend. I congratulated him, hiding how crushed I was, and got off the phone as quickly as I could. I will never forget how happy he sounded. After that, I decided not to hang out with him anymore or call him. My 18th birthday came, and I partied without inviting him. 2 days later, I was on MySpace. Yes, that was the cool thing at the time, and saw a bulletin, RIP Alan Hardwell 3. At first, I thought it was a joke, but after clicking and reading, I knew it was true. I found out he had hanged himself. The rumor was that his fiancée cheated on him. He lost his job, and his dad kicked him out again. He hanged himself from a tree across the street from his father's house. I don't know how much of that is true, but I couldn't help thinking it was somehow my fault for influencing his decisions, though now I know better. I will never forget how he looked in the coffin at his wake. I went to his funeral at the mortuary but didn't go to the burial, which I regret terribly now because I don't know where he's buried to pay my respects. He's the one boyfriend I know I'll never forget. Not just because he was my first love, though I'll always love him, but because losing him left a scar that has never gone away. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.